Oh, thank you. I hope I can get into time because I have a lot of stuff to cover, and a lot of the stuff is something that is very basic, but I think people have been forgetting for a while. Now, in my day-to-day job, which I'm lacking right now, which I should be working, is I'm a principal program manager at the developer tools in the MS Edge browser, and it also means Visual Studio Code. It means I'm doing a lot of stuff for developers out there and developer tooling, because I've been a developer for 25 years, web developer now, and I realized tooling is a space where we can actually do more. That's why I asked the question earlier again as well. This is my team. They're all amazing. And that's why I'm bringing them coffee. And that's basically my job that I'm doing there. But before I was this evened out level person and professional person, I spent a lot of time in my youth on computers doing other things. This is a picture of a demo scene party. I think it was 1996 or something like that, where I was basically programming on a Commodore 64, and then later on we were programming on PlayStation 1, Game Boy Color, and a lot of like 8-bit computers. And all of these computers taught me a few things. They taught me that limitations can bring creativity, and they can also taught me that software is something that means when there is something that you're told it is possible to do, there will be a way to do it. So we talked earlier quickly about gaming, and I was never a good gamer. So I basically learned programming by hacking games and giving myself endless lives because I was too bad at playing them. So that's how I learned how games are built, and that's how I reverse engineered assembly language back then. And then I wrote my own games, and that was the career that I started. And then I gave up for doing things on the web, which made more sense. But I learned that software is always peeking under the hood. It's always something that where I want to have an API that's so low level that I want to understand what's going on behind the scenes as well, and not only what we can do with it. So I have a hard time saying like use these 500 node packages and then you will be able to put a text on the screen. And I'm like, what do these things do? And most of the time we don't have time to look in those anymore. So in terms of security, performance, all kind of like problematic things, I think tooling is something that could work there. So when you see an image on the screen, I see pixels and I also see a data format, and I want to understand how this image got there and what I can do with it. And for the rest of this, I'm going to talk about the web and how we can put an image onto the browser and what we can do with the image once we got it there. Because people love to upload images, but a lot of times the tools that we have on desktop machines, the websites that we build, make it really hard for people to put content in. Things like Facebook, things like Twitter, and other like social media have learned that it's got to make this easy as possible for people to give you content. Then they're going to be happily doing more and more in yours. And when I see like upload forms that need it in a certain format and like be faxed in or whatever, it basically makes no sense to me. So there's basically 3 ways to get an image into your browser from your end user. There's an upload form, drag and drop, and copy and paste. And I talked about this a few months ago now that actually explains that to you. The HTML is pretty simple. You've put an input type file in there, and then you're okay. This will never break. This should actually be a thing that goes anywhere. If you put a form around it and you have a backend script, then actually this would work wherever. The JavaScript, if you actually want to go from file upload, is that. I'm not going to go into that. You can look that up. It's not that hard to do. Drag and drop is another one. You drag it into the browser and then you can upload it. We just changed the Chromium browser to not actually drag things in by accident. That was always a problem. You dragged an image into a web page, something went wrong, and the web page basically went away and the image got replaced it. Now it will actually open the image in a new tab in the foreground. So that makes a lot more sense because you cannot do an accidental drag and drop any longer. Copy and paste is something that we don't do much. And I think it's annoying because I love copying an image and pasting it into a form and then seeing it upload rather than having to drag it in or use an upload button. So this is the code how to do that in modern browsers or in browsers right now, which is not necessarily modern. Then showing the image is pretty easy. You do a load image function and then you create a new image file. That's a very, very old API in the browser, but it never fails. So that's why it's a great thing to do. And the onload handler on there makes sure that your image is actually loaded before it actually gets added to the document. So there's no problems with the streaming not happening or these kind of things. And that's of course boring. We just put an image into the browser and we show it in there, and that's not enough. I want to do more with an image that goes into the browser. I want to unlock the data that's in the image. I want to see how the image is made up and what I can do with it. And this is what Canvas is for. Canvas is an HTML5 API that was around, like, I think it's 10 years now or something. It's basically when I was still young and cared much more, then Canvas came into the browser. It's a super basic in-browser painting mechanism. It's built for speed, not for comfort. It was meant to be hardcore for video editing, for gaming from the very beginning. And it's powerful once you understand it, but it's confusing and weird till you get there. And there's a lot of good documentation out there. There's lots of good cheat sheets. So it would be interesting for people to take a look at it and see where we fail in the documentation. When it comes to the painting API of Canvas, I always explain it as an etch-a-sketch in the browser. Because what you do in the API is you get a canvas, you get the context of the canvas, which is 2D. There's also 3D, which where WebGL comes in. Then you begin a path, and then you actually put an arc to something. You move the pencil somewhere else. You put an arc again. You move the pencil somewhere else, and so on and so forth. And that's how you do the smiley. The red lines is actually where you take the pen off and put it back on there. So it's a bit like an etch-a-sketch, but you have the opportunity to stop in between. But it's still super basic and super weird to look at the first time you do it. But there's interesting features in the Canvas Painting API. There's a variable fill, stroke, line, and then pattern options. That's the same as you have in SVG. That's the same as you have to a degree with CSS as well. But this is very much the same that SVG uses, because that has already been standardized in the W3C. There's blend mode, so you can do the overlays. You can actually do a color burn or these kind of things. And the coordinate system is dynamic, and I've never seen it in any other painting API yet. So that means you can paint something and you can say like 100 to 100 to 150 to 150, and then you can change the coordinate system around it. So you can scale it and rotate it. So you never have to do the calculation of a rotation yourself. All you do is basically rotate the coordinate system, and then the stuff will be painted differently for you. There's also a drawing stack, so you can actually save and restore the state of the canvas rather than having to memorize what happened. And the best thing about it is that everything results in an image. We can do a lot of stuff with CSS nowadays. We have blend modes in CSS. We can create things in drop shadows. We can paint things with generated content and with SVG as well. But in the end, it doesn't become an image. If I ask my end users to get that image after I did all the transformations for them, they would have to do a screenshot, or I have to use something on the server side to turn it into an image. And I don't like that. I don't want to have your images. I don't want to know what's in your images. It might scare me. It might confuse me. And your data should not have to go to some random server just to get something simple as an image transformation gone. So let's use the canvas to open up the image and see what's going on there. So there's basically a simple way of doing that. You do the same thing that we said before. You create a new canvas. You create a context 2D, and then you load the image in there, and then you resize the canvas to the size of the image. So you read out image natural width, image natural height, and you resize the canvas, because then you have access to the whole image data. The canvas has a predefined size, different from browser to browser, but you can resize it anytime you want to. And once you resize it, you can now draw the image on the canvas at 0, 0, which is top left. And then you can get image data, and that will give you the data of that image. So instead of just being something random in the browser, it now becomes something that you can program with. So this is what it looks like. If you set a breakpoint, you can actually take a look at it in the DevTools. It's an image data object, which has a data unit 8 clamped array. This is just an array that's faster. And a data union, I have no idea what that is. I just found that yesterday. I didn't see any documentation for it. And the height and the width. So what you can do with the image data object is you can actually read the width and the height of the canvas to make sure that you have the right width and height, and you have the data. And the data is basically every single pixel in that image in RGBA format. So red, green, blue, and alpha, which means like how transparent that image, that pixel is. So for example, if you want to analyze and count the colors used, this is something I did on Commodore 64 last week, I think. And this one now shows me how many black, how many gray, how many dark gray, and so on and so forth, how many pixels of that color are in that image. That's pretty simple to do with that one. The one thing I needed was a UL for colors list to show that one, but that's just an HTML DOM thing. So what I do again, I draw the image on the canvas, and then I call function analyze colors. And that one, I just give the whole get image data object to it as a pixels attribute. So in this case, I get the pixel data. I read out the pixel data, which is kind of weird, so I should have named it differently. Then I create an object. And as you know, each object keys are unique. So basically what I do is I loop through all the pixels that we have. And I loop through the pixels in the loop with 4. As you remember, RGBA is 4 items. So I'm actually looping over every pixel right now in that array. I then create a string that is basically pipe separated. And I use that as the key of my object. So that way, if the key already exists, I just do the num instances of it higher. Otherwise, I set it as 1. And this is how I actually get all the unique colors and the value of them, how many of them are in the pixels, with one simple loop going over that data array. I then sort the object the other way around, like the biggest first, and then I write out a bit of a dumb thing to actually write out the span with the colors so you can see what was in that screen beforehand. So this is all that was needed to actually find out the colors, the unique colors in an image. And of course, once you have these colors, you can actually replace them. You can change them. You can shift them around. You can do like fancy glitching things. You can do all kinds of things, but you needed to know how many of which color are there first. You can read with get image data, and you can write with put image data. Everything in between is array manipulation. And it's quite fun what you can do with sorting algorithms and doing all kinds of things. So you can create pixel patterns, for example. I've seen Sepli Delisle at one conference doing a star field, and instead of plotting it at all, he just basically did a sorting of the data array, and that way some of them came closer to you and some of them went further because he gave them different colors. You can change each pixel of an image source, this writing filters, removing backgrounds, and so on and so forth. But don't make your life too hard. One thing I find people do is hilarious at times, where it gets too complex. This is now the next task that I gave myself. How do I do something that actually goes over the image and finds out the color of the image? So you see the swab on the right-hand side. I hope the video plays, showing the color that's actually under that one. So the first thing I thought is like, okay, I have the whole array of the whole document, of the whole image. I got to do something with that. So I get the mouse coordinates, and then I loop through the array and check the y times the width of the canvas was reached. So I go through it and realize which the lines are. And then I stop at the x index and read the color. That is a lot of looping to do, and it's also rather complex. And it didn't make any sense because get image data also can be called again, and you can call get image data with the coordinates and a pixel of 1 and 1. So that way you just read where the current mouse position is and you get the color that way, and you don't have to do any looping at all. So you basically just get it in one go, and the API of the Canvas tool, or the Canvas API method, gives you that what you wanted. And then I just joined it in the RGBA one, gave it a background color, and Bob's your uncle. With images, it's kind of similar. The pixel data is one thing, but images are a very powerful thing to do in use with Canvas as well. Draw image puts not only the image on the canvas and then gives you the pixel array, but can also crop and transform images with it. You can also scale and cropping. Scale and cropping is easier. Rotation means you need to rotate the coordinate system around it. I actually didn't put that in there right now. That's something that's going to come in the demo code out there. So cropping needs some getting used to. There's lots of parameters on that draw image thing. So in this case, it's like I showed you what the original image, the left top width height, left top new height, new width. If you don't use the new left, new top, new width, new height, that's possible as well. So it's a very forgiving API, and also some would say it's a very strange API, but it's actually not too bad to actually put some image somewhere else and resize it and put it on the canvas that way. So all you have to do is get the right numbers together. Now, zooming a whole image is actually easier to do. You could do this by just taking the image and then just resizing it accordingly and plotting it somewhere else. But as I said before, we have a dynamic coordinate system. So in this case, I just get the image again. I define a zoom factor, in this case of 3. And then I resize the canvas to the zoom factor multiplied by the width and height. So now I got the canvas 3 times as big, and then I just scale the coordinate system by 3, and then I draw the image. So that one automatically makes every pixel 3 pixels now for me, and I don't have to do that with drawing rectangles or something like that, which I've used in the past. An important thing here is image smoothing enabled to 0. If you put that to 1, the canvas will try to make it look better, much like browsers make images look better when they're actually scaled. But in this case, we don't want that. We want to see the pixels. So where the smoothing enabled is 0. That used to be a horrible thing different for every browser, but now it's standardized across all of them. So we're very happy about that. So what if you want interactive zooming, when you want something that is not just zooming the image, but you want to do something like this, where you basically show a bit of the image and you can see how it's done. So in this case, how I've done all the dithering and how I've done all the anti-aliasing by hand. It's not too hard either. Again, what you do is you load the image, you add an event listen of mouse move to the image itself, and that one calls the do zoom function. In the do zoom function, I call it get position. That's a bit of a helper tool that I've written myself for anywhere in the browser, which actually reads out where the mouse is and actually where the mouse is in accordance to the element that you're on right now. That used to be an absolute pain to make work across Netscape and Internet Explorer and all these things, but luckily enough, all these problems are gone because browsers standardize these things. And then I actually do a context draw image where I now find the coordinates X and Y, which is where the mouse is right now. And I go 10 pixels up and 10 pixels to the left. And then I carve out an image of 20 by 20 pixels and put it on the canvas at 0, 0 and 100, 100. So in this case, I turn 20 pixels into 100 pixels. And as I move around the current where the mouse is, I go directly into the middle and I get this quality of finding exactly what I was looking for. So valid image resources for a canvas to read are images. They must be on the same domain. You cannot just read it from the web somewhere. So there's a course thing going on. Any video as well. A video can be used as a source for a canvas. So you can inject anything into every frame of the video, like for example, watermarking or like changing the background and all kind of things. I was just saying when I started earlier, I could have done that background thing that you see here in Canvas in a browser as well. If you just use a green background or something like that, it's pretty easily done. And weirdly enough, HTML5 video does not have alpha yet. So we still have to do that if we wanted to do that dynamically in the browser. And any other canvas can also become another image source. So oftentimes I have one canvas to show things and another one to do the calculations, which is not on the screen because that means it's going to be much, much faster. Saving the final image is basically the easiest thing is right-clicking on it and saving it as. That's what every browser does nowadays as well. Other than that, you can do a canvas to data URL. And by default, Canvas creates PNG images, but you can also do WebP or JPEG. And if you have JPEG, then it takes a quality parameter. So you can say JPEG of 1.0 is no lossy compression at all. JPEG to 0.5 is half lossy, and so on and so forth, making sure that you don't create images that are too big. A bonus trick is that you can actually wrap the canvas itself in a link and use the download attribute to give it a name. So now clicking on this one after you change the href to the image data will save it as zoomed.png. So it doesn't get saved as like random canvas or a random number or something like this. And the way to actually get the data in is here, C to data URL at the href, and all I do is change the href to the image then. And when you click on it, you save it as zoom.png. So what do I do with that? Why do I have all that? And what I had fun doing it, basically. That's why I did it. But one thing I did was make thumbnails.com. There you can drop some images on there, and it generates thumbnails for all these images according to the settings that you can put in the settings file there. And then you can download the thumbnails as a zip. So instead of, you can either download them one by one, or you can generate a zip directly and have the whole thing as a zip. That's all in the browser. It's actually not using anything on the command line or anything on the server. This can run on your local host, and you can generate images that way. RemovePhotoData.com is something that I've done for a TEDx talk that I've given a few years ago, where I talked about security and privacy in social media. So every image that you take with your photo has a lot of extra data on it. It has like the data what photo was taken on, where it was taken on the planet, and when it was taken, which could be embarrassing and could not be a good idea to put somewhere else. So remove photo data, again, works only on your client, works only on your machine. You can upload a file, you can save it. Basically what I did is take the image, put it on a canvas, put it back into a JPEG, and that was that. So that kills all the EXIF data that your phone, for example, might have put into that image. Color picker from image is something I wrote a few weeks ago as well. Well, it's a month already now. So that one actually was a thing we needed in one of our projects where we had a limited palette of a color picker, and they wanted to upload an image to actually get the palette in, and that's what it does. So in this case, I clicked on that limited here, and I get these five colors. No, 7 colors out of that one right now. It's 6 colors. Okay. In case you didn't know, input type color can take a data list, and that way you can actually limit the amount of colors it would show and not show you the whole opportunity all the time. So that's a good thing for a CMS, for people not to generate more colors than they actually needed. And my pet project since 1998, it was written in Perl at first on the server side, is basically this one here, where I ripped fonts from lots of old demos and lots of games and things, and you can start making your own logos with them. So this one is like from an old, now we do program in pencil here with that font, and then we can center it, and we can analyze the different colors and see what's going on there. We can switch to different fonts, and I think by now I got like 70 different fonts in there, about 40 of them pixeled by myself when I was bored or I was in meetings that didn't make any sense, or basically that's what I do to actually pass my time rather than doing, I guess other people do puzzles, so it's not that weird. And you can also change the colors in that one to what you need. So in this case, I now got the logo color here. I pick this this purple, for example, and I can switch it to an orange and so on and so forth. And these are all the same functionality that I basically showed you earlier. Bonus tips. Canvas doesn't throw errors if you paint outside the canvas. So that is good, that is wonderful, because you can do really weird programming stuff and you don't have to worry about errors, but it uses memory. So if you, for example, have a game with like lots of sprites going around, showing them, animating those outside the canvas still actually slows down the machine. So it's probably not a good idea to do that. And frameworks like Phaser and stuff do that automatically for you. If you only need to convert with a canvas, like in the case with the remove photo data, just don't put it in the page, because that way the rendering of the browser will not get interrupted, so nothing would slow down. If you do a huge array looping, like changing a color, for example, it's a good idea to use a worker instead of just using it on the main thread, but the canvas is not available in the worker. That one needs to be in the browser thread, because we cannot have, there was a library called XCanvas that also gave canvas to IE6 that simulated something like that, but I don't know if that's even maintained anymore. Resizing a canvas is a cheap way to clear it, so you don't need to do a clear rect or a paint rec over it. Just resize it and it automatically gets wiped because it loses all the context. In animations, if you do something like an animation, an RGBA 0.5 value at the A gives you a really nice ghosting thing. So everything looks much smoother that way, and it gives you like a really nice little thing to play with. And a black and white map is a great way to do background collision in games. So I did, for example, racing games where I just had a nice game, but I just painted a black and white where the track is. And every time it actually went to a white pixel, I knew that the car would be off track. So I didn't have to do any comparison of the coordinates themselves. I just used the black and white canvas in the background to find out where the collision is happening. And that's all I had. So I hope you're gonna have some fun with that. I'm available on Twitter as CodePoet and Edge DevTools. If you have anything as a web developer that you need in developer tools to happen, tell me. And there's also a feedback mechanism in the developer tools themselves. If you found a problem, hit that one, and it's going to be a bug in my day-to-day job. And that's basically all I had. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Great talk as always. I get the fun. It's fun to ask you some questions now. So. The first question is, why did you switch from game development to web?
Basically, I wasn't that successful in it. And my main job, I just did it as a hobby. My main job was being a radio journalist. I was a newscaster at a local radio station, and I found that the web is the perfect mix of media and computing. So I could use both my talents to make a career. And that was that. I mean, I know a lot of people in the game industry. It's still an interesting industry, but I've never looked back in anger choosing the web. I still bet on it, and I still think it's a good option.
Great, I have to agree. So a few of us at RVU thought your subtitles were super cool. So we wanted to know how you did them.
How did what?
How you did the subtitles.
Oh, that's actually part of PowerPoint. All you have to do in PowerPoint is when you go to presenting, always turn on captions, and that one generates the captions automatically while you're speaking. Google Slides has it as well. Also, all the layout in the PowerPoint was basically done by PowerPoint for me as well. So I basically just typed in the text, and then there's this machine learning thing that shows you the images that would fit with what you just typed in, and you click it, and out of a sudden you don't have to do any slides anymore. It just does this for you. So this is turned on by default if you want to have it like that.
Oh, that's cool. I've not seen that yet. I've opened PowerPoint for a while though.
Yeah, it was only on Windows for a while, but this is a Mac now, and actually it's working on Mac now nicely too. So that's good.
Cool. With your development experience over the years, have you seen the algorithmic problem solving was important for you in your career?
No. I mean, this is glib. I was always a front-end engineer. I was always developing, well, I was developing Perl and PHP, and then I was actually doing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I know a lot of people that have a good CS background. They come up with great solutions. I was lucky to have entered the market early on, that it was just like 2 or 3 people back then in Germany that knew HTML. So nobody ever asked me these kind of things during the interviews. But it is the way we work right now, and the way we keep using other libraries and building on the shoulder of giants, so to say, having a good grounding in these kind of environments is great. But I'm still happy that anybody can become a web developer, no matter what background. And I don't think that it's the most important thing to know, because learning is the biggest skill that people should have. I mean, if you're engaged and the company actually wants to support you, then they will actually find ways for you to get into that mindset as well, without having to have spent the 4 years on that degree.
Great. And another question from Ben is, do you think opportunities in gaming is on the rise for the next 20 years?
Again, no idea. I've been out of that market since 1997. But opportunities on the web are actually quite good. There's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of companies are hiring. Like I think all of them do. So it's I think it's interesting in the games market. It was I've been looking at it as a spectator, and I'm actually excited by the quality of games nowadays. I'm also a huge film fan. And I'm getting very annoyed how formulaic films become, how the blockbusters are all the same movie, more or less. And with games, there's a lot of creativity that I don't see anywhere else. And I think the big budget decisions that are being made in gaming, like even with voice actors and people actually doing motion capping to actually do this stuff. And of course, the machine learning stuff that's going on in gaming, there's super exciting things in it. I just feel that I've been betting on this thing for 20 years. There's no point in me going back into that environment. But I wish anybody luck who doing that. And if you're excited about gaming, it's a great thing to do. Although it's always quite fun when you talk to gamers and they're like, yeah, I want to find a job as a game tester. And you're like, it's not as much fun as you think it is to test the games that you're playing, because you get very frustrated after a while.
Cool. Another question, sorry. Is about regarding learning. Do you think the 10 to 20% time that some companies are like allocating to learning is enough, especially for new developers?
Well, I mean, the 10-20 thing has always been like this myth that's been going around, and it's been like, that's where you can create. At Yahoo, when I worked there, we had these hack days where in 24 hours you can do whatever you want. In Microsoft, we have hack weeks, actually, where a whole week is going on like that. I think the creativity, I wished our market would grow up a bit and actually not expect developers to become creative in their free time, and actually empower people to be more creative in their day-to-day deliveries. I think it's very easy to actually give people free time and hope magic happens. But what does that say about your day-to-day job? I mean, we should make the day-to-day job as exciting as the 20% things you can take for yourself, and that's a bigger task that we do right now. But the other thing that I'm always getting a bit miffed about, and I've been doing it for a long time as well, is that we find this hacker mentality where somebody's crunching for 25 hours and then they're going to come up with something amazing without any input from the outside, and it's going to be the only way to do it. No, it means that you build something for yourself, and you probably build something very technical that you haven't asked any users about. Like in our case, we have to do like 3 rounds of user testing if before we even start something. We actually have to find out if there's a market for a product or if the need for a solution before we build the solution. And I think that's a much better way than just like hoping that magic happens when we leave the engineers to play and we give them enough coffee and beer and pizza. Because I think we all work together and our end users are diverse. So we as engineering teams should also be much more diverse than we are right now, because we're not answering the right question, we're just answering our own.
Sure. Similar theme, do you have any developers who just finished studying computer science or a boot camp? What you'd recommend for finding their first dev job?
Well, I mean, it's a matter of a company that supports you. I think it's tricky. I think one of the things I would advise anybody to do is to take a look into open source projects. You don't have to be a massive maintainer. You don't have to be a massive person there, but it's a free way to actually learn how things are built. It's a free way to get your skills, how to work in a team. And it's a free way to understand how actually the market works. So finding the right company is, of course, a big, big question. I mean, I know one that I work for that is quite fun, but I know others as well. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. The question is what you want to do. If you want to be just finished your studies and you want to get like rich quick, find a startup that burns you out within half a year and then run off as fast as you can. You don't want to be the person that maintains something that is not meant to be maintained. It's something that is just supposed to be there to be replaced or be bought by somebody else. It's a good way to learn about the craft and to learn about the stress of the environment. But I don't know. I mean, I might sound doom and gloom, but we're living in really strange worlds. If I were unemployed now or I look for a job, I would still look for a larger company that has been established, because they normally have a infrastructure in place that also supports me in learning and doesn't ask me to hit the ground running and code for 24 hours but for shares that might not even happen anytime soon. Our market is kind of bizarre how many things are throwaway, and it's great to build these things to learn something quick. But I think I think right now might be a good time to think about the future a bit more and think about not just to be cliche and say like, where do you see yourself in 5 years, but what you want to do in 5 years. And do you want to be in a place that has no place for you anymore if you're not as quick and fast and interested in changing your view every 2 minutes? Or do you want to be in a place that supports you when you want to change as well? I always, when we had the question earlier, how do you see a company that is successful or that's interesting to you? I always found companies super interesting that have different departments and encourage people to move around departments if they're unhappy in the department that they're in. There's not many that can do it, but it's a very, very cool thing to stay in a company, because the longer you stay in a company, the easier it is in terms of paper trail, the easier it is in terms of like promotion kind of things, because you're staying with the place, but you don't want to be just in one department that basically makes you unhappy, but there should always be an option to go somewhere else in the place. So hard to say. I'm very excited. I have to say I have a few projects running right now with interns. And I'm so impressed with the quality of interns coming directly from university right now. People are excited, they're engaged, they're actually organized, and I have been a complete mess compared to them 10 years ago. But luckily enough, I was in the right spot at the right time.
Cool. So obviously you worked with browsers for a long time. And obviously you worked in browsers when the canvas element was conceived. So knowing what you know now, what would you change about the canvas element?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the main thing that annoys me is the text tooling of it. It's absolutely atrocious. Like the quality of the quality of the typography and actually plotting text, you have to measure, then plot, and that's just not fun. So that's one thing that annoys me quite brutally. There's also a few security concerns we need to fix right now, like getting the image data a few times allows for fingerprinting. So that's something that has been on the radar of a lot of people at the moment. But in general, I think the main thing is to make it a bit more documented. The API is super rudimentary and super hard and geeky. So having function names that are more obvious, or having like some helper functions, much like query selector all, was much easier than document get element by ID and these kind of things. So an inner HTML made it much easier than just generating nodes with the DOM. Something like that would be one thing I would change. But in general, it was meant for speed. It was never meant to be a replacement for like a plotting library, like whatever is out there, or games libraries that are out there as well.
So you mentioned speed. So that kind of naturally goes on to our next question: is what is the performance of Canvas on low-powered Android devices?
It should be good. I mean, it's off the main thread. It's not slowing down the main computer, the main browser thread. So it should actually be okay. I mean, I remember in Firefox OS we did like the most when I worked for Mozilla. We did the most basic the basic phones, and a lot of the interface was basically canvas based as well, because we realized that DOM was actually kind of slow. So again, it's like a plotting API that is fire and forget. You basically paint the thing, and then the main thread doesn't have to care about it any longer. And it's not creating different layers in the rendering. It's actually a thing that should be quite okay to use. Much faster than SVG for sure.
Sure. Okay. You mentioned obviously off canvas can cause like memory. If it uses memory still, could you crash a device using canvas?
I guess you can crush a device doing a sorting on a nested array. I mean, if you do it wrongly, and you can do it properly wrongly, you can make computers slow down in anything. But I think the clamping of I don't know if there's an execution clamping in it in times, but I think there might be. So there's also a size limit as well. I think it's like 32,000 pixels by 32,000 pixels or something. So that would actually be another limit that you hit, and then the Canvas API just disregards the rest that you're plotting and doesn't do anything with it.
Cool. And the last question I've got is, so your logo is on Logomatic. Are they royalty free? Because I might need a new logo for an open source project sometime.
Well, most of them are ripped from either crack intros or demos from 15, 20 years ago. So I would say yes. Funnily enough, one of the fonts I got a cease and desist for, that one designer that did that asked me to take it down. But I know all the others basically, and most of them are mine. So yeah, go for it. It's
Cool.
just a pixel logo though. Like if you want to have a proper logo, it should also be what is it called, path logo for resizing and printing. But if it's just a throwaway thing that you want to have, please go for it. It's fun to do.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Chris. It was a really great talk and great having you.